We're here. Yes, that is me making the thumbnail for this live. It's closed. This is what we're studying to begin with. But I have nowhere to be for the next 3 hours. And so we're going to study more than just this, I'm assuming. Maybe we'll study this and then we'll try and paint it from different angles or something, or make something a bit concept-y out of it. That could be fun. We'll see. We'll see. I just think that's so fun that you can get a gradient down quick. I think the one thing about the gradient that's actually being used is it's more saturated. Ooh. Something like that. What if we... That's pretty cool. How is everyone doing? You having a good time this fine Thursday evening? It's a funny time, isn't it? Let's make the background darker as well. Womp. What if we just grab another image and we use that for the grass? Or not another image, but another painting. Like that's a painting. What if we grab this bit? And we eat into it. And we color balance it. That's okay. Hello, Eduardo. Welcome to the study session. It's so funny that so much of this is overexposed. But so much of it is... I think a lot of it's more green than this as well. I tend to go for very sort of yellowy, limey greens, but yeah, it's more of a phthalo green. That's cool. We'll call that a bush for now. And then I mainly just want to piece together some of this other stuff. Ooh, sorry for the I have an awful habit of just panning the camera constantly. I'm like rotating everything. That I have to stop, because if I ever want to time lapse this, it's going to be a nightmare. That's all of that has to be more golden and brighter. Yeah, like that. I think whatever shadowy values we want, I think we just need to poke them in exactly where we want them. That's okay. I tell you what, I'm also going to drop the image in the Discord. Yeah, I'm going to put the image in the Discord for anyone that wants to paint along. If I feel like talking a bit about drawing from life, like I talked about, that'd be really cool. Okay. We can talk about drawing from life. I love drawing from life. I think it's one of the most valuable things you can do. For a couple of reasons, really. I think, first and foremost, you're seeing things in 3D. So everything that we see when we're drawing or painting, hello Bobbin, is 2D shapes that are projected onto our retinas, right? We're just seeing shapes of light being beamed into our eyes, which is cool and all. But there's a difference between seeing something that is 3D and then your eyes reducing it to 2D shapes, and seeing a series of 2D shapes where they're already sort of defined and made up for you and just copying those shapes. So I find that when people just work from photographs, the understanding of how those shapes that they're copying relate to 3D form and, the rest of the world, I find that is sometimes lacking a little bit and can be remedied by some nice old drawing and painting from life. Let's keep track of these separately while I paint so that I remember. So 1, 3D form. Now, the reason that drawing from life is better for 3D form is because you're not seeing a version of the image. You're seeing two versions of the same image from ever so slightly different angles. And that kind of allows you to parse that information in your head and get something that feels 3D, right? It feels like it has that depth. Okay. Another reason why I really, really like drawing from life, which we'll write as number 2, is I really like working traditionally, and I want to make a video about it. I feel like working traditionally has some limitations that are pretty important. One of which is the lack of an undo. I think that's obvious enough. But the lack of an undo isn't all that there is. You have a limited amount of resolution when you're working traditionally, and I feel like this is something that people should talk about a little bit more. So I can zoom almost infinitely. Like, I can really get in here, and then if I wanted, I could upscale the canvas and I could zoom even further in. But traditionally, like, no, this is my A4 page. I can't really zoom in. I can move my head closer or further away from the page, but it's not doing all that much. And so I just have to work with these bigger elements of the image. I can't zoom in. I can't get something that is like crazy polished right away. And I tend to think that that's quite a good thing. The more people stay away from doing insanely polished things, is probably for the best. I think I want to turn the flow down on this brush. So that's 2. Now I mentioned that there are some limitations with digital. That's one of them. You've got limitations in terms of the materials you use. I really love drawing with pan, and the kind of paint that I paint with oils is not all that forgiving. And so one of the things that you do when you draw and paint traditionally is, I think you just think a little bit harder, because you're concerned that you're going to waste that resource, whether it's ink or paint or anything else. And you don't want to waste the resource, obviously. So you're gonna make decisions more carefully. And that's sort of the crux of what painting is it's not so much a manual skill, unless you're talking about something like sign painting or calligraphy or something. It's not really about the way that you move your hand or anything like that. It's more to do with just the thoughts that you have while painting and the decisions that you're making, the places you're choosing to put down color, and you're making a decision about that color. And so if you are forced to think a little bit harder about those decisions, I think they are going to look better. Yes, Bobbin, I can talk a little bit about how I'm picking the colors for this house. So I'm thinking about color all at once, but obviously that's because I've been painting for quite some time. The way that you might want to consider thinking about the color is by separating it into these 3 categories that you have on the color wheel, so hue, saturation, and value. But I find that there is an order that you could think about them. So I tend to think about value first, brightness, right? So I'm looking at a color and I'm making some kind of estimation as to how light or dark it is. Side of the house, for example, is very, very bright. Then I'm thinking about the hue. Well, it looks yellowy to me, so I'll go yellow. I don't think that part, I think most people could get. And then the saturation, I'm not really thinking about the saturation in terms of, well, how saturated or how desaturated something is. I'm almost using saturation as a step in for how cool or warm something is. So the more saturated it is, the warmer, and the less saturated it is, the cooler. And so you can do this without Photoshop. You could do this without painting, without drawing, without anything. Just when you're out and about, whether it's on the bus or just in your own home, you could look at something and make that assessment. Look at it and go, well, how bright or dark is it? How cool or warm is it? You know, what other colors is it maybe closest to? Then when I'm shifting to try and paint the shadowy part, I'm thinking, okay, well, it's got to go comparatively in a direction. So when I'm picking this, it's not like I'm choosing a completely new color from the top of my head. It's more like I'm taking the yellow and I'm going, well, the shadow has to be darker. Okay, so I'll shift it darker. I know it has to be cooler, so I'm probably going to desaturate it. And I might move it further towards green because it could be picking up some of this stuff. But really, it's just darker and cooler, and I can do those with those two bars, which is, I hope that makes sense without me basically explaining color theory from scratch or something. I really want to use more punk. I want to use more masks and selections and things. So I feel like I want to just do something like this. Notice that I'm just breaking it up into big shapes. And like I can paint smaller shapes inside of that for sure. But really it's those big shapes first. I'm actually seeing a little bit of the sky behind it come through. Oh, someone's knocking on my front door, so I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. Efteraki is in chat. That was your parcel. Has just arrived. Ready for you to inspect. Ariadna is using an opaque flat brush, then a bristle or scatter brush. Good approach for painting vegetation. It's really difficult to say because you'll get to a point with painting where there isn't, I know this is going to sound very Mr. Miyagi and nonsense, there isn't really something that I would describe as a good or a bad approach. I'm a firm believer that you get to a point with painting where painting is less about knowing which approach is best and more about being able to adapt to multiple approaches, right? So the way that you've just outlined there, using an opaque flat brush and then painting on top with scatter and stuff, yeah, I could do that and I could make it work, because I would be adapting to the problems as I see them, right, within the image. But I could also start with a scattery brush and then start putting opaque flat shapes on top, and I could probably make that work. Or I could start with an image and shave into it, which is kind of what I've done here. Right, I started with another painting of mine, and I just cut into it. Like that's something that I could do. I could scumble with like a really low opacity brush, really big. So it's yeah, you could do that, and it might work. Some things are going to work better for you than they might do for me. Bobbin, you want to know how to tell if something's cool or warm? I don't really have an answer for that. You just sort of let me present you with two colors and you tell me which one's cooler and warmer, right? So I've got red and a blue. I think everyone understands that the red is warmer and the blue is cooler. Okay, what if I have a yellow and a less saturated orange? Well, I'd say that the yellow is warmer and the less saturated orange is cooler. But you can get really into the weeds with this, where you can say, well, you know, what's this versus this? You know, I'd say the one on the left is cooler, but it's a distinction that, again, you just get used to the more you draw and paint. I wouldn't worry too much about it for now. I mean, you can see that this is not as warm as it's a feel thing. It's a very intuitive feel thing, which I apologize for, because it's not a very satisfying answer to your question, you know, but sometimes there aren't very satisfying answers to the questions that we have. Like, that's too dark. Plunk, plunk, plunk. Watching Twilight. You enjoy Twilight? With full saturation, is red warmer than yellow? I'd say so, yeah. But, I mean, it's not a particularly... It's not an important differentiation to make, to say that red is warmer than yellow. I don't think you're going to get a situation where that is a helpful thing to know, really. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll prove me wrong. Some people don't even really think about warm and cool in the same way that I do. You know, there are lots of different ways to approach it. You know, I could grab like a really desaturated pink and use that. Maybe that's better. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Bonk. This is a cute little windmill. I'm a big fan. Hello, my lord. Thank you. I like that when anyone addresses you by your username, it sounds like I'm a squire and I'm addressing my king. That's quite fun. I almost just wanna get warmer in there, and I want down here to get warmer. And then there's all sorts of little gubbinzy bits and pieces and shadows that are coming up. Chunk, 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 chunk. And actually, you know, these roof tiles, they're doing something, aren't they? This part's getting something on top. What a cute little thing. If anyone has any particular images that they'd like to see me study, or you'd be interested to know how I would approach it, feel free to drop them again in the Pubby Discord. and I will take a look. Like this particular bush. Now I'm tempted to approach by drawing lots of squiggles in it, but that's very much how I draw traditionally, and not how other people might do the same thing. And that's fine for me. That is absolutely fine. Would this have scattering in the shadows? Like light scattering? I mean, everything has light scattering in the shadows unless you're on the moon. You know, it's why you can paint the moon and the shadows are pitch black. I think the fun fact about that helps me remember that the moon has no atmosphere in which light can scatter is that when the astronauts went up there, they could only walk towards or sideways from the sun, because their shadows were so dark that if they walked directly away from the sun, they just couldn't see where they were walking. Like their shadow was pitch black, you know. Which is I find that to be a fun fact. As fun as a fact about shadows can be, you know. Like this over here, we need to break this up. It's too bright. Or too dark, actually. And then maybe we actually inject a little bit of pink onto our horizon. Why not? Okay. So I think that's done, or done enough. But it's such a fun little thing that maybe we take it a step further. I think first I'm just going to save it out, and then unless anyone else has a particular reference they want me to have a look at, work from, I think we're going to basically expand on this and make like a ridiculous fun windmill, maybe from a different angle. Okay. You're always trying to wrap your head around material properties and everything being reflections. Yeah, everything's a reflection, it's just whether or not that reflection is scattered, or how tightly the reflection is scattered. How can we think about it? I guess you could think about it as the predictability of reflections. So we'll do this and then we'll move on. So if I have a wall, God, that's awful, isn't it? Let's draw in white. Oh, here I am. Ooh, wham! And I throw a ball. I can almost kind of predict exactly the angle it's going to come back at, right? And so that would be a very clear specular reflection, aka the surface is perfectly smooth, it's very predictable, it's only reflecting sort of into one place every time, right? It's always going to go there because it's very predictable, because it's very smooth. But if I have the same thing and all of a sudden my surface is something a bit less predictable, wham! You know, this ball, is it going to hit here? In which case it would go there. Or is it going to bounce there, you know, and bounce up or away, right? And so as it's scattering more and more and more, it's less predictable. And so it's like the same amount of reflection that is concentrated here. In fact, we'll literally do it. So the same amount of reflection that is concentrated here has to be diffused over a bigger area. Right? So it's the same amount, but spread around. That's how you get something like that. I hope that makes sense. It's a very dodgy explanation, but I think it was Devin Corwin that explained it this way anyway. What causes the purple horizon? Artistic license. I just want to put pink there. Whether or not the horizon is actually going to go purple is a different matter. Depending on the time of day, the horizon might get warmer, and it's because the light is lower, so the sun is lower. So this is the planet, or half of the planet, right? And we can think that if the sun is right at the top, then its light is coming down, and because it's sort of going down at a perfect angle, it's just going to go straight through. And when it goes straight through, it's going to be blue, right? Because most of the rest of the visible light spectrum is just being eliminated by our atmosphere. But as the sun gets lower, like down here, it's sort of skimming across the surface, and when it skims across the surface, it begins to scatter, and as it scatters, like this is what it's scattering into, the white light. If I can draw, okay, the white light is going to begin to scatter into all this, and it tends to scatter, you know, at different times of day. Other things change the temperature of the sun in terms of the time of day. So in the morning, the sky tends to be cooler, right? A dawn is cooler than a sunset. I heard it said somewhere that it's because at dawn, everything's very dewy, like there's lots of liquid in the atmosphere from the night before, where everything's cooled down and water has condensed in the air. And so because water's condensed in the air, everything's cooler. And then after a whole day of dust being kicked up and the sun heating up the ground, and there's a lot of hot air, seems to get warmer. So yeah, you think I drew a better diagram? Oh, good, I'm glad. Yeah, there's a lot of science that goes into this stuff, especially when you're thinking about material reflections and how they affect how we view stuff. And so I tend to be a very intuitive artist. Like when I'm actually drawing and painting, it used to be that I just didn't think about all of that, right? Because I would just see something and then paint it. I think that's the position that a lot of people are in, where you just, like Bobbin was asking me about picking colors for this. A lot of the time it is just that I see the color and I pick it, and it's intuitive and it gets better over time the more you do it. But the problem is that I then became a university lecturer, and as soon as I realized that I have to explain how this stuff works to other people, I can't rely on just, oh, yeah, it just works that way because it looks that way and that's how it works. And so I sort of had to go on this nice little adventure of, like, how can I say this? I was painting the right colors, so I was doing this without knowing why it was happening. Like, I was doing this without knowing why it was happening. And so it was less reliable, less reproducible. And now I know why it's happening, and so I can tell other people why. So, yeah, I think knowing the stuff changes how you view the world. I think it just gives you more creative power and control to, like, if you don't know how it's happening, then you can't really warp it to your advantage. But as soon as you know how it works, you can play around and dance around it a little bit more. So that's fun. That's very fun. Right, let's remove our magical notes. And then let's take this, make it bigger. Whoop. And then, like, I think this bush is getting a bit too big. So now that we've studied the image, I'm gonna insert a little bit of what I want into it, what I'd like to see. And what I would like to see if I didn't mess up my own layers, that is. So I want to see that there. I want to compress this down. Yeah. I wanna play around with the structure of this. I think maybe this one should be even smaller. Let's make this one literally like a chimney. I don't know why you would have a chimney on a windmill. Maybe it's like a windmill slash bakery all in one. How does that sound? And so maybe it's actually got some part down here. Let's just remove some of that. And maybe we actually give it some sails, because this one has no sails. So, what would a sail look like? You know, is the sail just gonna go here? Let's put that. Put that behind. Plunk. It's the Ron Weasley house. But maybe it should get more blue. I like the idea that this is these mega sails coming up. There's going to be other things going on here though, right? Like if this building is, just wait and see, is gotta cast a shadow back here onto this roof. And into that shadow is gonna scatter some of this light from up above. Like, that is cool. That is just so cool. Yeah, maybe we just imply something. I'm gonna combine all of this other than the sky, just so that I can keep that sky there. You know, I don't think this building down here needs sails anymore. Maybe this is just like a shed or something. Why would it need sails? Like, that is fun. Let's see. I think I want like an indication of a path coming on through. I just love that. Should actually be this side that's in shadow, shouldn't it? Yeah, this side should receive more light, if anything. And on the path, it's gonna be dirty. I think I want this to be like a tree. Yeah, I do have courses that I recommend. Um, I really, really like Devin Cohen's stuff. So it's not a course, although he does do courses now on Underpaint, but he just does some good fundamentals videos on his Gumroad that I recommend you check out. Yes, I'm duplicating a tree. Lighter, less saturated, bluer, softer. Maybe. The lit side isn't going to get any lighter. Craig Mullins has, I think, the best digital painting course on Schoolism. I think it is called Digital Painting with Craig Mullins. And I really, really love that course. I just think it is so perfect. Look at this windmill. So that was our little study. And now we've got a painting that, maybe we don't quite want to call our own, because it's effectively a study that's been changed. But it is something. I think this is an excellent way to learn. Should we sunsetify the whole thing? There. I think I prefer it daytime, sunny. It's like little English countryside. Maybe we imply that way back here there's a second one. Maybe you can actually see the Thank you, Rosie. He has a new one with Ramon. Yeah. I was tempted. I mean, I have a Craig Mullins course that I still haven't watched. I bought it because it was on sale, and then I just haven't sat down and gone through it, which is shameful, really shameful. My hero, Craig. Maybe we don't have that. Maybe it should just be stood on its own. I tell you what we can have though. Some little birdies in the background. But then maybe we don't need the smoke. I don't know why a windmill would have smoke anyway, to be honest. You got the Craig Mullins illustrations course as well, yeah. It's a funny one. I just haven't watched it, haven't bothered. I should. I really should. It's probably a good few nuggets of wisdom in there. I watched the week 1 and I did the exercises from week 1. And then I just didn't continue for whatever reason. Right. This is windmill number 2. Do you know the amazing thing is we can actually just grab it? And make it even taller. Like, how does that look? Is that fun? Maybe we just grab this top half and we make that taller. Yeah, I quite like that. Big squished windmill. Maybe it needs to go in as well, though. I'll leave it like that. Okay. What to study next? What to study next? That's always the problem. Let me take a sip of my drink. Bonk. Okay. Next study is gonna be let's have a look in my refs folder. I have a reference folder called the compost bin, which is where references go to die or to be studied. Let's go with this one. Yeah, I think definitely if you've had a mentorship with Devin, going back and studying the schoolism is a great idea. Absolutely great idea. Wonderful idea. This is a funny one, isn't it? Very funny. Boom, 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 boom. Maybe not that big. I think that big. I'm using all of my available brain power. We're just blocking out really quite simply where I think some of the shadows are going to go here. Maybe we... There's shadow behind him. There's shadow on the wall. There's loads of MacGuffin over here. That's fun. That's fun. The painting you just linked, who painted that? It's, I just can't remember his name. Famous Orientalist painter. Cannot remember his name for the life of me. No, I've disappeared. I'm back. But yeah, that's cool. We'll try that. I think I want like maximum grime. Put this just. Pacini. Maybe he's not the guy I'm thinking of. Is it Alberto Pacini? Let me just look at my folder. I do have a couple by Pacini, and it is Alberto Pacini. But Alberto Pacini isn't who I'm thinking of in terms of the Orientalist. It's not Lambert. It's not. Well, Lenbeck did some interesting stuff. It's certainly not Leighton. Jerome? It's Jerome! Let me just. This is the guy I'm thinking of. Famous Orientalist painter Jean-Léon Gérôme, who is also a very good sculptor. There you go. Jean-Léon Gérôme. Yeah, big fan of Gérôme. Okay, this is something. Should we just merge it all together and then paint some more? I mean, I'm really quite pleased with the fidelity of the image with just a couple of values, you know. I'm glad that you can tell what it is. I'm quite happy that his entire arm can just get lost. Maybe we try and bring it back. You know, maybe there should be some top light for this pack thing. Maybe the very bottom of his shoe should come back. Hello, Eduardo. How was learning art for me? That's a big question. That's a very big question. Learning art from me, I kind of spoke about it a little bit before, has always come from a place where I have intuitively understood something, not been able to understand why, and so my results have been okay, but very sloppy. And I was fine with that. Like for years, I would go around and go, I don't really care, you know, as long as it looks good. I think the hardest part about learning art for me has not been like copying images. So I think there are different steps you could break down learning art into. I think the first step for most people is going to be, can you copy an image, right? And effectively what that is a demonstration that you understand how to use the tools that you've been given to look at something and replicate it, right? I think that's an important skill. But past copying an image, like making my own images, that's where, you know, I think painting from imagination, you have to rely on actually understanding what's going on a hell of a lot more. And so I set about to try and understand why I was making the decisions that I was making. You know, and that takes a while. It's not something to be sniffed at. Certainly not. I've always been very interested in teaching art. I think that puts me in a bad position to teach art, ironically. I'm very envious of people who have the industry career first, right, and then they have the sort of credentials to back up the stuff that they're teaching. Whereas I have no interest in having an industry career. I do a little bit of freelance work here and then. I've done concept art for some films, for some very small games. But it would be nice to have more of that industry experience, just so that when I tell someone, hey, this is how you do something, I have that sort of reassurance that, well, I know what I'm talking about because I've done this thing. So it's tricky. It's very tricky. But I am young. I still have time. Maybe I'll do a bit more industry work. Maybe it'll come my way. I think a really important thing to point out as well that I think made art a bit more intuitive for me was that I learned completely traditionally for the first, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years. I think that really put me in a good place where I had a more of a strong grasp on colour and value because I actually have to mix it. That might sound like an arbitrary distinction to make, but I think there's a difference between seeing the colour you want on a colour wheel and clicking it, and actually having to go, I am at this colour, I want to get to another colour, and then you sort of have to travel your way across the colour wheel by mixing physical paint to get from A to B. And as you're getting from A to B, there are so many transitionary colours and shades in between that, again, that becomes a bit more intuitive. It's not this arbitrary decision, it relates to something real, you know. Thank you, my lord. Thank you. Yeah, I know I am. Think about it another way. It's more like it would be useful in terms of marketing. You know, a lot of people start their YouTube videos by going, "Hello, my name's insert name," and then they go, "And I've been a professional concept artist for this many years," or "And I've worked on all of these different projects," and now you're sort of roped in and you're interested in hearing what they have to say. In a way, practicing traditional art can make you better. Yeah, it's not in a way. It's 100%. When you're painting, you're not. You wouldn't even want to categorize things as digital and traditional. It's you just understand these principles, and so you can do them either way, right? It works the opposite way around. If you do a lot of digital painting and then go back to traditional painting, the skills transfer. Like you won't, if you've never traditionally painted before, but you're a master of digital painting, you're not going to pick up a paintbrush and be awful. It might take you a minute or two to get used to just the physical, way that the brush moves or the way that the paint sits on the canvas. But it's important, right, that you understand, the decisions you're making, the values you're picking, where you're putting those values and colors, that kind of a thing. I recently got into oil paint, like really recently. It's quite a new thing for me. The last time I traditionally painted was 4 years ago, something like that. I had almost completely moved back to just working digitally. And I picked up oil paint and it transfers so insanely well. That here are some oil paintings that I've done recently, and they are more or less how I paint digitally. So that's an oil painting of a skull. That's a digital painting of a skull. And they're not that far off each other. Obviously, this is a different lighting scenario, and I'm playing around with a lot more of the sort of digital collaging things. I'm interested actually in putting down maybe a collage base before I start an oil painting. I think to oil paint after doing 3 or 4 years of digital painting, and all of a sudden I'm like a baby deer. No, it's all the same stuff. The main thing is just getting used to, how thick you need to apply the paint. I'm used to mixing colors, so I'm comfortable doing that. That's not an issue. The main thing is oil paint has a sort of funny consistency and picks up some of the paint underneath it sometimes, which isn't ideal. You now think of colour as like it needs to be darker or greener or something, which is easier to get by mixing than in digital. Yeah, yeah, do try oils if you have the time and the patience. They take a while to dry. But yeah, yeah, I think color mixing is probably the biggest gain from working traditionally. Patience might be another one. If I were painting this tree traditionally, I don't know how long I would bother. If I were painting it digitally, I don't know how long I would bother spending on it. But I was sat in this room, completely in the zone, no music, nothing, just silence. Sat there, concentrating, staring at this tree for like 2.5 hours or something, um, and just slowly mixing the color, having a lot of patience, putting down the color exactly where I want it, moving on to the next bit, um, one bit at a time. I did a portrait recently. This is the first portrait I've done in oils. It was live. Big thank you to Jared for sitting still for 2 hours. um, I did pay him in takeaway food, so I don't feel too bad. But I had a lot of fun. It's really, really fun. It's quite big compared with a lot of my other oil paints as well. I think it's the direction I'd like to go in next is more live portraiture, plein airs, things like that. I've been going out to my um, local park. I went to the zoo. I've been having a whale of a time. So this is from the zoo. Um, I really want to go back, but every Saturday I have driving lessons, and so I'm a bit busy. But Jesus, I had so much fun, and the amount of attention that you get at the zoo, it was like I was one of the attractions. I had all these parents and their children coming over and looking over my shoulder and going, "Look, he's painting! Wow!" And I think it's so challenging. Winston Churchill, not to get all high and mighty, Winston Churchill is most famously known as the wartime Prime Minister for the UK during World War II, right? What people don't know is he's a painter, and he's written books about painting. And the way he describes painting is like it's like planning for a battle. You can see how the experience from being head of the war cabinet in World War II helped him with his painting, because he really talks about it like a mental struggle. Like, you sit down and it's not relaxing. It is a really intense workout almost. You're thinking hard. You leave painting fatigued. Like, I was on the train home from the zoo this day, just exhausted from walking around with my paints trying to paint stuff. But it's the best kind of exhaustion. It is like going to the gym. So I love it. It's really challenging. It's really tough. Here are some plein airs. The canvas sizes is so small that the grain really shows through. Like, compare that grain to to this. This shows the difference. I think this is like that or something by comparison. So the other thing I was talking about earlier with traditional is the resolution that you have to work with, because I've fit this much detail into this space, but when I'm painting bigger, like when I'm painting bigger, that's all I've painted in that space, and it's not very detailed at all, right? I've painted that compared with this, and so you get different ideas about scale and brushwork on different scales and level of detail on different scales as well, which is interesting. Really, really interesting. I'd love to do more. I'd absolutely love to do more. I say I would love to do more. I'm going to do more. I can't wait. If people are interested, I might figure out how to set up my camera and record a full oil painting. The only problem is I would have to be oil painting something on my desk so that my camera can be hooked up to OBS. So wouldn't be able to go and do like a crazy plein air or something. Well, I might do, but I'd have to record on my phone, and I don't have a very good phone. Look at this fella. That's alright. That's not bad. Should we try that Jerome study? Let's select him. And put him here. And save him out. Painting digitally is very calming, while painting with actual paints is kind of stressful. Yeah, it is. It doesn't have to be messy. I think that's the other big part of painting traditionally, is like just being conscious of the space that you have on your palette and not making a huge mess. I think that helps though, because you don't put every single color down in the world. You know, you can mix quite a bit with few colors, and wherever you can, you go, well, I've already mixed this color for the... In fact, let's bring up the Jared example, or these. So wherever you can, you know, I mixed this color for this sort of warmer tone for the skin, and then it was almost like, well, I've got it now, and I don't want to mix another color and take up more space on my palette. So where can I put it? And I put it here, and here, and here, and I mix them in there, and it's the same color for the lips and for the eye. So it's like using the same color in a lot of different places. You know, this gray here on the sides of the face is the same color that I used down here, just this doesn't have an underpainting. You know, it reappears here. I used it to tint some of the eyebrows. I used it to tint the light on the nose. You can see I've grabbed a bit on a bigger brush and smeared it into the background. And so, like, I'm trying to make the paint go as far as I can without mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing. So that limitation has a benefit, and you're going to find that with anything, that every time you come across a limitation, that there's a related benefit to it that you are able to reap if you really, really want. I have a video, I don't know if anyone here has watched it, where I paint with my feet, because I'm a masochist. But because when you paint with your feet, there are so many limitations, but so many benefits. So here's a painting I did with my feet using a mouse. And yeah, it severely limited in terms of what you're doing manually, right? And yeah, this is with a mouse with my feet, and how you can actually control and maneuver the brush. But all of a sudden, if you physically can't maneuver the brush to get down really specific marks, well, then you have to paint a lot more generally, and you have to work with much bigger shapes and shape relationships. And again, the same thing with the color, right? You can see I'm not going to be able to get the exact color I want in the exact place I want. And so actually underneath this, that's one big blob of color. There's a big blob of gray there. Like, this is me with my foot going and just swiping downwards without much accuracy, but trying to get it into roughly the right place. So it's bigger picture thinking because I was physically unable to do smaller picture thinking. Yeah, the cow was very, very, very surprised. I've done a couple of these. I need to find more of my feet paintings. I've not done it in a couple of years. You know, these are from a few years ago now. I swear I painted a crocodile with my feet, or an alligator. Yeah, here you are. This one's with my feet. And again, I'm so limited by what I can actually do that so many of these marks are really, really general and rough. But they come together to form an image that makes sense and works. Could I explain the 4-step art ladder? Yeah, it's another I don't. Well, I'll attribute me hearing about it from Corwin. So I've heard about it from Corwin, but I've read Craig Mullins talk about it, Scott Robertson talk about it, or is it Glenn Vilppu? It goes back a while. Richard Schmid definitely talks about it, and I love Richard Schmid. So I recommend you check out Devin's explanation of it, because he's a good teacher. He's so much more eloquent, well spoken, and there's less umming and ahhing, and he just asserts that things are the way they are. So if we imagine I don't like the idea of it being a ladder. I think I prefer the idea of it being a pyramid. And we'll set it out. And we're not even going to draw it as a pyramid. Maybe this is part of the problem, is it does look like a ladder. I could draw it like a pyramid if I felt like it. So the idea is that there are 4 principles, 4 spectrums, 4 concepts, we'll say. And on the bottom we have, I know that looks like a P. On the bottom we have drawing. Then we have value. Then we have edges. And then we have color. Okay. Devin calls it a ladder. A ladder implies that you can go up and down it. Maybe he also calls it a pyramid. I prefer pyramid. Let's go pyramid. So the reason it's a pyramid is because you can't build a pyramid from the top down. You have to build it from the bottom up. And the same idea applies here. Okay, so all of the things rely on everything below them. Well, texture is a result of the placement of values in different places, isn't it? You could draw texture. Texture could be at the silhouette, so that could just be included in drawing. Yeah, edges, drawing, value. Texture I would describe as a subject matter. So we have to divide things into like, so these are principles. Or let's think about this as like method versus over here, which would be subject. Okay, so this is how we do things, how we paint things, how we draw things. This is what we're drawing. So you could also say, well, where's anatomy? Where's perspective? Like, why aren't they on the list? Well, perspective is a subject. Anatomy is a subject. It's a thing that we are going to draw and paint, as opposed to the method by which we paint them. I would include texture. I would say texture is a thing that we paint. If you're talking about getting an actual, like, copying a texture or trying to emulate a texture that exists, yeah, you could include texture in edges or value or anything else, but it's more of a subject. So anyway, it's a pyramid. Everything relies on all the steps below it. Okay, so if we just have color on its own, but the edges are wrong, the values are off, and everything's in the wrong place because we don't have drawing, then it's just a mess. If we have color and edges, but the values are off and everything's in the wrong place, well, it's still a mess. I mean, you can't even have color without value because, you know, the color is dictated by the value of the color. Do you know what I mean? Every time you pick a color, you're picking a value, so they're inextricably linked. Even if you have color, edges, and value, again, if they're not where you want them to be, aka the drawing isn't there or isn't complete, then it doesn't work. But we can work up the pyramid and everything works fine. So a drawing on its own is a drawing, and it can look really good, and it can describe something. Okay, that's fine. A drawing with value is a shaded drawing. That also works perfectly fine. That does its job. A drawing with a value and edges, and a drawing with value, edges, and color works as well. So we work up, and they're kind of in order of importance, you could think, if you wanted to. you could dispute that these are. It depends how you think about values, about edges, because edges are a relationship between two values or two colors, and so edges do imply or inform color in a bit more of an abstract way. Devin explains that a bit better than me. Now each of these steps has a contrast, a spectrum of contrast, we'll say. So the other idea with all of this is that everything in art relies on a contrast. So when we're talking about picking colors, we're talking about contrasts between different colors. So instead of going, well, here's one arbitrary color, and then here is another arbitrary color, that they're completely separate, like they're in some kind of void. We're viewing them compared with each other, and so one is always darker and one is always lighter. One is always cooler and one is always warm. You know, even if the colors are really close, one of them has to be cooler than the other one. One of them has to be warmer than the other one. One of them has to be darker or lighter, unless they're the identical same color, the same hex code. So, color we're going to describe as the contrast between warm and cool. Okay, so everything has to be warmer or cooler than something else. Edges we're going to describe as soft versus hard. Every edge you can classify as being softer or harder than another edge. Values are going to be dark or light. Every value you choose is going to be darker or lighter than another value. But drawing's the tricky one, because it has an infinite set of contrasts. Okay, so drawing could be few versus many. Drawing could be big versus small, tall versus short, fat versus thin. It could be round versus sharp. Like that would be a contrast that we can make. Okay. And all of those work. All of those make sense. There is one overarching contrast that Devin defines, and I'm tempted to agree with him, which is that you can split drawing into, he says, optical versus conceptual. There's a really good book called The Practice and Science of Drawing by Harold Speed that goes over a lot of this stuff. And we can think of optical as how we see, and conceptual as this is a hand, if that wasn't already obvious. Conceptual as touch. Okay, so if I see someone's nose, I see a group of, and again, the important thing to remember is all of this builds on itself. So 90% of the time when I get a student go, what's wrong with my image? It looks wrong. It's bad. I, without even looking at it, I can guess that the problem is the drawing. You know, that encompasses the perspective, the anatomy, whatever else it might be. The drawing is going to be off. Drawing maybe we define as the arrangement of elements, which I think Craig Mullins said in an Age of Empires interview. Okay. So as long as you're working up, you're okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. How fast is the transition for edges? Faster or slower? I hope that makes sense for you, Eduardo. Let me know. It's sort of this overarching thing, and it's really simple, really. This is a great way to think about it and to explain it to someone who has never heard it before. But in practice, it's just drawing is really, really important. then value is a little bit less important, but still really, really important. And then edges and color, and they all relate to each other. And they don't work in isolation, and that's it. But yeah, drawing first. Right. Let's see what. Where did you put that image? Did you put it in voice chat? You did put it in voice chat. This is a tricky one. We'll just hide that for now. Who's Devin? Devin Corwin. He studied under Craig Mullins years and years and years ago. I did a mentorship with him. Then he launched Underpaint Academy, which is like a rival to Brainstorm. I think is the closest thing you would describe it to. Is it's very much like Brainstorm. It's individual courses run by industry professionals that teach like reasonably specific things on each course. And he's a great teacher. He's really, really good at explaining things that other people can't explain so well. The first time I went through all the Craig Mullins schoolism stuff, and then I went and I read his Scigen Forum posts. He's a bit cryptic, man. I remember him talking about the limitations of traditional art and making reference to freedom of speech in Bolivia. And I was just sat there thinking, what on earth does this have to do with anything? Because he is kind of a rambly old man. He's a great artist, and he's a good teacher, but I think in order to understand some of the stuff he's talking about, someone like Devin is amazing. He makes everything a lot more beginner friendly, and a lot easier to digest and to sort of get you introduced to these topics so that you can go back and watch the Craig Mullins videos and go, right, I know what you mean now. I know the kind of terminology that you're using, and whatever else. I think he's a great mediator. Let's, I tell you what, let's try and do something new. Should we just try? Just for a moment. And do a 10 brushstroke painting. I think so. Well, I've used one of my brushstrokes. Maybe it should be more blue. Now, a variation on this task is that you can actually paint inside of your own brushstrokes. So, some people think that there's nothing stopping me adding a little bit of texture, and I'm inclined to agree. So that's still one brushstroke. And then we'll make a new layer. Where's the next brushstroke going? It's gotta do something like that, hasn't it? And what I'm really trying to get is the perspective of it. So it might seem like an insignificant thing that I'm trying to get the angle right. Yeah, we'll say something like that. And remember, I'm allowing myself to paint inside of my own brushstrokes. So I'm going to grab this. And the one thing that I want to do is define a gradient. So it's almost like it's not 10 brushstrokes, it's 10 decisions, you could say. That's brushstroke 2. there's a much darker element in here that's doing something like that. We'll chop it off at the bottom, and then our next brushstroke will be inside of that, and will be a lot darker and bluer. Something like that. I think both of those are probably a bit too fat. Yeah. Ten shapes, 10 decisions. Yeah. Something like that. You can do it with 10 brushstrokes, but it's not as interesting. Let me pull up some of these that I did last year. God, I gotta close some of these Photoshops. So here are some that I did last year. I find this one interesting. I used one of my decisions to put down a photo. They're still pretty simple. I really love this one, that the whole body disappears. It's just not there. You don't need it. Who needs it? And that's the idea with these, and we'll see that as I continue the one that I started, is that, again, the limitation breeds innovation, I would say. And so the limitation here is, well, we have fewer resources to make this image with, so we have to spend them wisely. What are you going to spend your 10 brushstrokes on? Are you going to spend your 10 brushstrokes getting like this woman's lipstick down? No, because that's not very important to the overall image, I would guess. Right? Are you going to spend any of your 10 brushstrokes getting these little patterny things that go in front of his head? No, probably not. You know, even this is just like oblong shapes on a background. This one's interesting. These are both the same amount of brushstrokes, and I tend to do this twice every time, because the second time you begin to get just a little bit more efficient once you've already figured out what you do and don't need. And so on this one, I've actually managed to indicate some of the forms of the figure, considering it is a painting about the figure. I've forgotten other things like these lines, but I do like these lines because they indicate something about the perspective receding in said depth. So you can't win them all. You got to decide what is and isn't important to you. You know, on this one I've decided that the specular highlight on his forehead's important, even though it's not really that bold in the image, but I think it helps this read as something that's turning, whereas this is maybe a bit flatter. So, let's just close all these. We'll keep that one open. So that's, what number? Is that 4 brushstrokes? So we're on to number 5. Yeah, I think that's what I want. Maybe I just do it with a regular hard round. I think that's important, establishing a ground plane. Maybe onto that we get some kind of texture. Who would I say are the best art teachers in the world and best art schools today? I'm legally obliged to say that Staffordshire University is the greatest art school of all time, and I am the greatest art teacher of all time. But I wasn't taught by me. Yeah, I think Devin Corwin is. There's something about him. There's something about Devin Corwin and the way that he explains and describes concepts that makes him such an excellent teacher that he's got a rate pretty highly in my estimation. This is brushstroke number 6. I do in fact want this bush to come up, although maybe I just want this shadow that's implying that this part of the building is poking out. That's 6. I'm going to be very wasteful and put another one up there. Maybe I shouldn't. Yet I will. You'll be the best in 5 years. Oh, okay. Well, I'll be the extra best in 5 years. So, what are you gonna do about it? And I'm gonna Bagsy, padlock, black magic, throw away the key, that as well, so you can't even argue with it. Let's count our decisions. Close this stinking tab that I don't use. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 7 decisions. I've got 3 more. Well, this horse-shaped blob down here is important. For sure. That's 1. This horse-shaped blob down here is important. That's 2. The path continuing is important. That's 3. That's how I would simplify this image in 10 decisions. Yeah, I'm just not going to be able to get a person with a brushstroke. It's going to be a person shaped like these guys over here. Potentially you could say they deserve a shape, which we could do if we weren't limited to 10 decisions. Maybe it was a waste to put this up here. The sky being that color, you could argue that just the background being a color shouldn't be a decision, or shouldn't cost a decision. I would argue that it should cost a decision, to be honest. There are other things you could do in one decision, like you could turn the spacing up on a brush. Where have my layers gone? Bring them back. Bring them back. You could turn the spacing up on a brush. To try and get some kind of thing going on. Probably ends there, doesn't it? But I tell you what, now that we have this, let's combine it all. Let's put it down here. And then let's shrink this one. And let's just start using this to make a larger painting. So where else are we seeing that shadow? We're now free to make any decision we like this bush here. Could argue these shadows need to be darker. You know, there's another building thing here. The shape of the shadow underneath it is important. You'll have to leave shortly. Oh, you enjoy. Yes, I was doing the 10 brushstroke, or 10 decisions, I guess, kind of thing. Which is interesting. Very interesting. I don't watch any other streamers, so... Oh, tell a lie, I do. I watch Monster Garden. He streams... His streams are very relaxed. He was streaming earlier today, in fact. I think they are well worth checking out. Let's take this blue. Let's just redefine what that shape should be. No, I don't just watch myself. That is just awful. Like this is doing the same thing over here. I haven't taken Devin's value courses on Underpaint. No. What an obnoxious load of triangles. No, I haven't taken Devin's value course on Underpaint, but I did a mentorship with him a couple of years ago. And as far as I know, we covered the same stuff that's on his value course on Underpaint. This was before Underpaint existed, so... Let's bring these bushes back. They have some kind of darker zone. Punk, 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 punk. Punk, 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 punk. Punk. This is getting more of that red, which is cool. Very cool. Let's cool down some of that. The horses are feeding at a basin. There is a floor that's going in a different direction. These people are casting a shadow. God, I need to stop rotating the canvas like that. This doorway is also going to be on an angle. This horse is coming out here. We should maybe be a bit more chestnutty. Brown. Sure. Enjoy, Eduardo, enjoy. There's some kind of nonsense. How do you draw horses? No one knows. Something like that, I would imagine. It's got a little tail. I guess the important thing about horse is actually that it's pretty reflective. As objects go, horses are pretty reflective. Yeah. That's how everyone knows that horses are reflective. They're looking a lot more horsey now. There's a highlight under there indicating that the horse's stomach does not in fact touch the ground. And maybe we can even go darker. Epic. Horse is like a skinnier cow, dog but bigger. Yeah. Horses are easy, just give me more hands to draw. I like that. I like a horse being a skinny cow or a big dog. Big dog with big teeth. This donkey over here is not having a good day. And he's going to continue to not have a good day because I don't know how to draw donkeys. Sure. That's a person. They've got a little red hat on. There they go. And they've got little red legs. And this guy over here has got a red hat on as well. Okay. We're getting there. Thanks, my lord. Thanks very much. Yeah, horses are weird. Horses are really, really weird. Very, very strange creatures. No rhyme, no reason, just odd. Let's lighten this guy up to differentiate between him and his background. This path is also kind of interesting. Okay. That works. Let's grab it and put it here. And then let's grab that and put that here. And then let's grab our reference and scale it up. Put that here. And then let's Okay. The last thing that I think I want to do is just filter, stylize, find edges, multiply. Yeah, we'll do that. Right. Does anyone have any questions? Anything they want explaining? Any concepts at all? Because if no, I will go and play a video game. If yes, I'm more than happy to sit here and explain something. Whatever it might be. Just to go over what we've done. Is we did a little study of a windmill, which was cool. Then we like stretched and warped it and made it more of a concept-y painting. Then we studied a sniper at a window. And then we did a 10 brushstroke or 10 decision version of this. And then we scaled it up and just added on some more decisions. I mean, they're still pretty simple. We're trying not to go overboard. I think if we went straight into studying the whole thing properly from the beginning, we'd get lost in the source, in the detail, in the information. But because we started it with 10 brushstrokes, we sort of continue that mindset going into polishing it and just subdividing it into more and more information each time, which is cool, very cool. Okay, gamers. You were able to talk about drawing earlier. Do you think being able to draw with line is important? My opinion on this is purely based on what I like to do as an artist. I really don't like having things unavailable to me. And so you've got all these tools, so we're making an image. You've got all these tools, like line, sheep, color, value. You know, and these are you could do more. You could say another tool would be photo bashing. 3D, definitely. And then you have 3D, you have like hard surface. And you have like organic sculpting. Okay, so I look at these and some people, some very good artists, amazing artists, will make their entire career and life, and all their art will do is use line and value. It'll just be shaded drawings, and they're beautiful and they're perfect and they're wonderful. Some people will just do paintings that have no lines, that are just drawn shapes, that have value and colour, but they'll never do any photo bashing, they'll never do any line work, they'll never do any 3D. And it's still beautiful. Like Henry Wong is a good example of that. Henry Wong does the most beautiful paintings that are just graphic shapes stacked on top of each other. like that's great. For me personally, I feel a bit like Ash Ketchum in Pokemon. My personal goal is to do everything. So I want to be able to do 3D modeling, hard surface, and I want to be able to 3D sculpt. So I can do that. I have clay. I've learned how to use ZBrush and 3D coat. I can 3D sculpt. I want to be able to make amazing paintings in color and have a really strong grasp on value. I want to be able to photo bash, which I can. I want to make beautiful line drawings, and then the next day I want to make things in just graphic shapes. So the way that I think about it is very scatterbrained. Part of the issue with that is it makes you very difficult to market yourself as an artist, I think, because there's not one thing that you're known for. Like I know a guy, he gets critique on this channel. He's my good friend, and he did spaceship designs for Bungie and stuff, and that's all he does is spaceship designs. He wakes up, does spaceship designs, goes to bed, wakes up, does spaceship designs, goes to bed, and he's really, really, really good at it. I think that would kill me. The idea of just doing one thing forever would really kill me. So when you're saying, do I think it's you being able to draw with line is important? To me, yes. It's important because it's another tool that I have in my tool arsenal that I can use whenever and wherever I like. And it might be that I can use line, but I choose not to. And I would rather it be I can, but I choose not to, rather than I can't, if that makes sense. So all of these things, like I don't choose to photo bash very often. I can do this, I can 3D model, but I don't really use it very often. I'm choosing not to. But I know that if I had to or if I wanted to, it's there as an option and I can go and do it. So I think some line drawings are absolutely beautiful, you know. Let me bring up some life drawing to make a point. If I can find what I'm looking for. Which I can. Like these are a great example. Oh, and then I guess I have my life drawing from the zoo. We'll bring that back up as well. Okay. So I've drawn this from life, and I'm thinking about it in terms of shape and color. These I'm thinking about, they've got line, but I'm thinking about them in terms of value and shape again. So I'm blocking in value-y shapes. There's not really heavy line work going on. In some areas the lines are just barely anything. Okay, I'm thinking about this very much in terms of value, or I'm defining planes. This is much more like a painting approach. But then this is like pretty reasonably line-based, still value. I actually didn't pull up the example I intended to. Okay. Now this is just line. And I think it's great. It's just as good as some of this stuff that has value. It's just different, and I'm learning something different. So that's the other thing about this, is as well as these things being tools that you can use and you can apply to something, I think the act of learning how to use this tool gives you some kind of knowledge or information that you can take and you could apply somewhere else. 3D is a really perfect example of this. So I think if you never ever planned on using a 3D model to paint on top of, or to pose to get perfect reference for your line work or whatever, if you never ever planned on using a 3D model, I still think you should learn 3D. Because it's not that it helps you make a final image, as in you're using it in your process. It's by going and doing a load of sculpting, you're gaining a fresh perspective to view the world from, right? You're no longer viewing it in terms of flat shape like you might do with a drawing. Like, you're looking at things and you're thinking of them as 3D volumes that you can build in 3D space and rotate and sculpt. Like, thinking about something as a sculptor is very different to thinking about something as a painter. And having both of those two mindsets to switch between is super helpful. Like, when I'm thinking about painting, sometimes I'm thinking about my subject as though I'm sculpting it in clay. I'm thinking about it as a 3D thing. Sometimes when I'm sculpting, even though I'm working in a 3D program, I'm thinking about making graphic 2D shapes in terms of the silhouette and things, which I've learned from drawing and painting. So they're transferable in different and interesting ways, even if I never ever use it. I still think it's useful to learn, just because of the way it affects the way that you view some of these other principles. Everything artistic is so neatly and tightly intertwined that it's really quite beautiful. It's like an atom or something, and just yeah. It's 8:15 in the evening, and I'm rambling. Oh, I'm yawning, which is great. I hope that answered your question in an awful rambly way. Again, this is just me. I feel like I have a compulsion to learn everything and do everything. You know, I really want to get into animation, I think, next. I'm trying to learn how to use every kind of traditional paint. Sculpting clay and different programs or whatever else. Cause why not? Why not? You got plenty of time on this planet. Why not learn all of this stuff? You find it with musicians a lot. You find that anyone who's a musician, as soon as they learn how to play one instrument, they just start learning like 5 other instruments. Which is the same with me. Like, I can play the banjo and the guitar, and the violin and the didgeridoo, and the ukulele, and whatever else I need to, right? So it's all applicable, all very fun. Right, gamers, I will end the live there. It's been fun though. I miss these study streams. So maybe I'll do more if there's interest in them. Okay. Enjoy, have a good evening, and good night.